Lionel trains have endured for over 100 years. Why? Why have Lionel trains survived while so many other toys have faded away? What is the magic of Lionel? To find the answer, we traveled all around the country and talked to folks who collect Lionel trains, who have built layouts, and who share a genuine affection and enthusiasm for Lionel trains. So let's get started. Welcome to the magic of Lionel. Chuck Ream has two layouts. One is toy, the other is real. The toy layout measures 22 by 28 feet. The real layout, actually a short line railroad, is 8.5 miles long. Let's talk about the toy layout first. It features Lionel post-war trains and T-rail track. Lionel introduced T-rail track in 1936 in response to the increasing demand for more realism. T-rail track is solid, it is shaped like the real rails, and uses bolts and a fish plate to connect one rail with another. This also is similar to the method used in connecting real rails. T-rail layouts are rare. In fact, this is the first one we've ever seen. Chuck, who is 61, remembers visiting the Lionel showroom with his dad in 1947. At that time, the Lionel showroom layout featured T-rail track.
I just thought it was so super looking. Being as old as I am, and I'll soon be 61 years old, I was quite familiar with the Lionel catalogs before the war, and they always showed the best trains running on T-rail track. And in 1947, I had the opportunity to go with my dad to New York, and we went to the showroom, the Lionel showroom, and at that time, the big layout was done in T-rail, and I just thought it was magnificent. Even today, I'm sure there's quite a few collectors that have never even seen T-rail track, or if they've seen it at a meet, didn't know what it was. And it is super, it's a great conductor of electricity. You don't have a whole lot of contact problems. I can run the outer loop on this layout with a 90-watt transformer, which astounds people who have trouble running a little figure 8 with a 90-watt transformer. Better contact, yes, and better conductivity. It's just like running a long electrical lead with a real heavy wire as opposed to a light wire. Your T-rail is solid and it's a good conductor. And the fish plates that hold the outer rails together are bolted in, and the contact is perfect.
T-rail came in sets with 16 sections of curved track and only 2 or 4 sections of straight. For this reason, straight sections are much harder to find than curved. In today's market, curved sections sell for between $5 and $7 and straight sections between $8 and $10. T-rail switches go for between $100 and $200 a pair. Chuck operates mostly post-war Lionel, but has taken a fancy to some of the later engines.
In panning around, I'm sure you caught the fact that I've got quite a few SD40s. In fact, the Milwaukee Road SD40 that was running is a Conrail engine that was custom painted Milwaukee Road for me. In addition, the latest version of the Southern Pacific Daylight, which is the GS2, actually the earlier prototype, is the one that Lionel put the rail sounds in it, and I love it. I love the whistle, I love the bell. It operates beautifully, it runs great, and that's what I've got pulling the daylight cars. Even though I have the GS4, I like the GS2 better because of the rail sounds. It smokes great, and the smoke comes out around the cylinders, and I really like it. I suppose there's a lot of collectors that are probably screaming or writhing in anguish now to see something like that running on the track, but I have a policy. I run everything I've got. And the Boston Albany is one of Lionel's later issues, and it's a beautiful running locomotive. I can't say that about all the new locomotives that Lionel made. I bought that Lackawanna 484, and that thing jerked around the track something terrible.
The rear drive wheels were hitting the frame, causing the engine to run unevenly. Chuck solved the problem by pulling the rear drivers and adding nylon washers. The washers forced the drive wheels out away from the frame.
And now the engine runs like a clock. There probably is no substitute for an experience when you run this stuff.
The most unusual engine on the layout is the Milwaukee Road Bipolar. It was custom made by Bob Spangler in 1974.
He had this engine, and Bob was a great old gentleman. He's passed on now, but he did a lot of repair work on GG1s and rebuilding them. And he had acquired these handmade bodies that looked like a Milwaukee Road Bipolar and put them on a rebuilt Lionel chassis, and it makes a very impressive and a very beautiful running locomotive. And he had one of these sitting there, and I just fell in love with it, and I had my money out, I think, before I even got over to the table and bought it, and I'm not sorry I did. I love it. The locomotive as it sits, his rebuilt chassis and the handmade top on it, $200.
The layout consists of two loops, an inner loop and an outer loop. This track design allows for a number of possibilities. Chuck explains how the train can make a reverse loop.
Let's say the train is running in this direction. If it goes through this switch straight, down this lead, and goes through the bascule bridge, through this switch, and comes back, when it gets back to the control panel, it is going in the opposite direction that it was going in a minute ago.
Or the train can turn at this switch instead of going straight and exit on the track closest to the wall. And when it enters again, it is going in the same direction. There's a third possibility.
If it goes around this switch like this and comes through this switch and back through the bascule bridge in the opposite direction, now you have reversed again. I have already run a train for 20 minutes straight and not done the same thing twice on the layout, going from the inner loop to the outer loop in one direction and then another direction and reversing. It's almost like a computer program when you get to doing it, and it's a lot of fun to work out the different routes. All the track is on Homasote roadbed I got from a gentleman in Kingston, New York, is Pole Manufacturing. And I can't say enough for him. He is a real nice man to do business with, and he has an excellent product.
Chuck's objective was to see trains run and accessories operate with minimal attention to scenery.
I myself feel that Lionel in particular and American Flyer and Marks, of which I've got some representation on the layout, have made enough accessories and nice pieces. You can pretty well cover a pretty good sized area without having to do a lot of fancy landscaping. I'm not knocking the guys that do it. I'm quite envious of those that do a nice job of mountains and such. Again, I just like to see the trains run. I like to see them run well. I'm proud of the fact that generally, when I bring people down here to run the layout, it runs pretty good. I don't have a whole lot of glitches. I've run everything that I've ever got. The minute I get it home, it goes on the track, and if it doesn't run right, I'm not afraid to take the screwdriver out and open it up and see why it doesn't run right. J. Lionel Cohen had a pretty good idea. It certainly to me, is the greatest toy that's ever been invented. It teaches you manual dexterity, it teaches you electricity, you got to think a little bit, and you have fun doing it the whole time. So it's a joy. It always has been for me.
Chuck's first train was a Lionel 262.
My earliest recollection of anything as a tiny tot, I can see myself with the tray of my high chair out in front of me, in front of the dining room table, with my dad running that little 262 around an oval track on the dining room table. Once or twice a week, we would take the car out that we had to Morton Grove and line up along Lehigh Avenue with 200 or 300 more rail fans, if that's what you want to call them. And the Hiawatha would come out of Chicago at about 7 o'clock at night doing 100 miles an hour, and it sure made an impression on a 4-year-old. That love of trains has never left me.
Like his father, Chuck wasted no time in getting his son, Chuck Jr., interested in trains.
My son was born in 1956. We moved into our home in Northbrook in 1957. The first train I bought for Chuck was at Christmas 1957, the Canadian Pacific. I bought it at a discount house in Chicago for $66. Added the extra cars along the way.
Chuck and his son worked together building a Super O layout and eventually decided to build a 1-inch scale live steamer.
It was a 5-year labor of love. It was done with little engines, castings, and a lot of machine work, and a lot of cussing, and a lot of, will it work or won't it work? But it does work. It runs beautifully. It burns soft coal. It runs at 100-pound steam pressure, and that little beast will pull 7 people around the track. And it has. By the time that we were through with this, and my son, of course, was real deeply interested from the start. By the time we were through, he was taking machine shop in high school. He became a crackerjack machinist.
The two Chucks joined a live steam club and met Hugh Crane and Herb Soberg. In 1973, Hugh and Herb opened a tourist railroad in downstate Marion, Illinois, about 300 miles south of Chicago. It was called the Crab Orchard and Egyptian Railroad and consisted of 6 passenger cars and a 242 Columbia tank-type steamer built in 1946 by the H.K. Porter Company of Pittsburgh. The day after Chuck Jr. graduated from high school, he headed for Marion and started working for the Crab Orchard and Egyptian. That was in 1975. The CO&E started hauling freight in 1977. The same year, a fire destroyed the passenger station. The fire put an end to the tourist train, but the freight business boomed from the beginning. In 1979, a 280 consolidation built in Montreal by the Canadian Locomotive Works was added to the fleet. Meanwhile, Chuck Sr. was still back in Northbrook, chafing at the bit to join the crew.
My major occupation for most of my life was printing. I had my own printing business, which was successful enough that when the opportunity came that Herb and Hugh and my son came down here to make the big railroad go, I was able to put some money into it. And in 1980, I finally couldn't stand it anymore. I sold my printing business and I moved down here and went railroading full-time.
Business continued to boom, and in 1986, the CO&E acquired this SW1200 switcher built by the Electromotive Division of General Motors in 1965.
It is a road switcher, which means that in addition to being very capable around the yard switching cars, it can also get out on the high iron and travel 40, 45, 50 miles an hour if need be. We have an interchange in Marion with the Union Pacific and the Burlington. An interchange is nothing more than a track that connects our railroad with their railroad and gives them a place to drop off incoming traffic and pick up outbound traffic. Stuff that is destined for the shippers in Marion or the receivers, they drop it off, we pick it up, and then we go and deliver 1 or 2 cars to whatever companies that need them. And likewise, if they're shipping something out or sending the empties out, we go collect that and put that on the interchange, and then the big railroad takes it to the rest of the country, North American continent, Mexico, Canada, anywhere on the North American continent.
The day we visited the crab orchard at Egyptian, Chuck and his son dropped off a tank car at the Pennzoil plant and an I-beam flat loaded with landscape timbers to be womanized at the Permatreat Company. Chuck is proud his company has helped the economy of the area.
Without our railroad, those people would have left, and they have said that publicly, that if they couldn't have had rail service, they would be gone from the area, and taking with it probably what amounts to close to 1,000 jobs.
Chuck Ream has been able to keep his family's tradition of trains, which started with his father, alive. He builds layouts and works with his son on the real railroad. As the ad says, it doesn't get any better than this.
I hope this don't sound too spooky, but there was more than once when I felt my father's presence in the cab with us, because he loved trains, and had he lived, he died at a very young age. I'm sure that he would have been as wrapped up in this operation down here as Chuck and I had been. I love it, and I thank the Lord that I've had the opportunity to do it, and it's been sweetened by the fact that I've been able to work with my son. And I know that he loves trains as much as I do. Well, that wasn't so bad. It could have been worse. It could have been worse, yeah. It could have been hotter.
When Bob Brenneman was 7 years old, he was given an American Flyer freight set.
I still have my first train, which my dad got me in Christmas in 1936. The interest never did wane.
Not only did interest in toy trains not wane, it expanded. Today, Bob Brenneman has a large collection of pre-war trains and a fine garden railway.
Well, my primary interest, I would have to say, is standard gauge. I actually got started in the 50s and joined TCA in 1959. 25 years ago, we moved here, 1966 to be exact, and one of the influencing factors of this was the building that we're in right now, which was formerly a butcher shop. And in fact, we still have the smokehouse, and where the train collection, where we are right now, was the packing room.
The 12 by 20 packing room houses a 6 by 18 foot layout and Bob's O-gauge collection, mostly Ives, American Flyer, and Lionel. The standard gauge collection is displayed in what used to be the butcher shop's freezer, a large L-shaped room at the rear of the building.
York, and of course, I still have some of the old timers that'll come to visit, and their favorite remark when they see me after a year or two at a meet, do you still have your trains in the freezer?
The layout has 2 loops, one for O-gauge and one for standard. Bob uses the layout to demonstrate the trains and to display accessories. The layout is jammed with them. There's the American Flyer transom station from the 30s, the 113 Lionel City Station in the harder to find late colors, the rare Ives glass dome station made in the late teens, and the Ives freight shed. This is the rare version with corner lights, and 2 Lionel classics, the 381 electric and a 444 roundhouse section. The O-gauge collection is on shelves above the layout. In 1932, Lionel produced the 258 steamer in an uncatalogued set with Ives markings. The set included Lionel 610 cars with Ives decals. The Lionel Army train, introduced during World War I, was the first military item to be made by an American toy manufacturer. The engine, some track, and 2 cars sold for $5.
At the time, it was a real popular and very sought after today. There's a nice boxed winter set, 1932 Lionel.
The Lionel 4U set, introduced in 1928, came unassembled and taught a youngster how to put a toy train together. The Lionel paper train, made so kids wouldn't forget Lionel trains during the war, was a replica of a pre-war freight set headed by a 224 steamer.
It's the same numbers on all the cars, and the only difference being the color of the boxcar. Instead of Tuscan in the original 224 set, the paper train was yellow. The green 390 is another one of my favorites, being it was uncatalogued, made in 1930 only. That's Ives President Washington, 1927. And it's a cast iron locomotive, complete with the little cast iron engineer in the cab.
In the early days, passenger car lighting was rather primitive. The lights were strung along a wire with wooden sockets and brass inserts,
Which they would hook to the hot post of the locomotive and dangle back through the cars.
Bob has a good assortment of clockwork and electric trains made before 1920. The Edmunds Metzel Company, which later became American Flyer, made this freight set around 1908.
They did not furnish a caboose with their freight sets, so at that time they were purchasing them from Bing in Europe and Germany, and if you bought a Edmund Metzel freight set, you had a Bing caboose with it.
The Ives No. 2 clockwork, made in 1908, is one of the oldest sets in Bob's collection.
Hafner made different heralds on their passenger cars with their clockwork engines, and I'm currently working on trying to get all the different road names that I can.
The hardest to find are the Chicago and Northwestern and Santa Fe. In 1935, American Flyer cataloged a clockwork freight set which included a coaling station and an engine with a battery-operated headlight. The battery which came in the set was dated 1936 and has never corroded. Wherever there are trains, there are toys. The layout sports a Wyandotte truck with battery-operated headlights. Bob's toy collection also includes 2 Tunerville trolleys, the regular version and the version that came as a prize in a Cracker Jack box. And all the Lionel hand cars, Santa Claus, Mickey Mouse, Peter Rabbit, and Donald. And both Lionel clockwork boats.
A very early set of the 30s. While Lincoln logs are still being made today, they don't compare with the early ones.
Seeing the Lionel airplane on display is not unusual, but seeing it operate is. In the late 1950s, Bob bought a gasoline-powered locomotive and built an outdoor railroad. Bob and his wife, April, named the railroad after their 2 children.
7.5-inch gauge, and I built that for my children. It was the B&B Railroad for Barbara and Bobby, and along came Tom in 1961 so we had to change it to the BB&T railroad. And that ran for 5 years, and the best babysitter in the neighborhood. And it was gasoline powered, but it looked like a steam engine. It would haul 3 grown-ups, 3 adults, or 6 or 8 children.
When the Brennemans moved, the outdoor railway stayed, but Bob never forgot the fun he had operating outdoors. It was the mid-70s, and garden railroading, which had started in Europe, was gaining popularity in the United States.
I started in late 70, about 1979, but that was just a loop, and it has evolved to what we have today with 3 trains running, quite a few feet of track. Civic clubs come, the scouts enjoy it.
Bob's Garden Railway is now L-shaped. There are 3 loops. An LGB mogul-type engine operates on the biggest loop, a 40 by 10-foot oval, which winds around a bridal wreath hedgerow at one end and miniature Alberta spruce trees and a water fountain at the other. Two European-style locomotives, a small switcher and a steamer, operate on the loops near the old butcher shop, amidst marigolds, pansies, and another water fountain.
Past year, normally I would have a lot more color in my layout, but no. Petunias, the wife has a few geraniums, and marigolds are always good because they can be shaped to accommodate the trains going around the track.
Bob converted LGB's battery-operated cable cars to electric power by installing the motor which turned the spit on the family's electric barbecue. The cable cars operate just fine, and fortunately, the Brennemans have no pig roast schedule. Between performing maintenance on the Garden Railway and tending to the collection and layout in the old butcher shop, April always knows where to find Bob.
So she calls when supper's ready, and the rest of the time, if I'm not in my train room, I'm out on my hands and knees in the Garden Railway.
Oscar Fox likes to operate toy trains. He's not partial to any particular era, gauge, or manufacturer.
I primarily was interested in getting several gauges and something different.
Foxy, as his wife and friends call him, did not limit himself to the table surface.
So I started by making the table, and that didn't give me enough action, so I went beneath the table. That didn't give me enough, so I went to a little section under the small area, and then even went to the shelves.
4 different gauges operate on the table level, all on independent loops. There are 2 standard gauge loops, 1 G scale where an LGB electric operates, an N gauge, and an O gauge loop with 4 switches. An electrical brake permits multiple train operation on the O gauge loop.
And I can run 3 or 4 different trains on that O gauge layout, the way it's arranged.
But that wasn't enough. Foxy wanted to run more trains, so he went under the table.
Underneath I have a standard gauge and an O gauge, and on the floor there's the 2 standard gauge, Then back under the little section, I have 2 roll gauge and a trolley.
But that still wasn't enough, so Foxy went to the display shelves. Each shelf has 16 feet of straight track and a bumper at each end. A K-Line South Shore commuter train operates on the top shelf, and a Lionel Mohawk on the bottom. The operation of the shelf trains is simple. Each end track section is dead, so the train stops. Push a button on the control panel, and current flows to the dead section. The engine cycles to neutral, push the button again, and the train is off in the opposite direction.
I usually take my hands away from the controls, and that excites people because they wonder why it's going to stop.
Oscar's objective was to build a display for his trains and toys, without regard for scale.
Well, I think you have to decide what you want. You know, you go in for model building, or you go in for scale, or you go in for particular types of equipment. My previous layout was all trains, just trains. This layout, I made a toy room, and I got out all the toys that I could find, and still buy toys. I have some that I had when I was a kid, some of those Buddy L trucks and things under the table I had when I was a boy. So this is really a toy room. There's a lot more in there than just trains. But the focus is on trains.
The layout almost fills the 15 by 22 foot room. The table was constructed using 4x4s and 2x6s covered with 3/4 inch flakeboard. 5 Z transformers control the trains, and 7 smaller transformers operate the lights and accessories. 3 15-amp circuits power the entire operation. Mention reproductions, and you get a wide divergence of views. Those in opposition feel reproductions hurt the value of the originals. Those in favor feel reproductions allow people to enjoy trains and accessories they might otherwise never have an opportunity to own. Foxy agrees strongly with the latter view.
My original trains were originals, and I had a layout at a different location. And when I moved, I sold those and said I'd never get into trains again. Well, as I told you, it's a disease. So after a few years, I got started again, and I have just good feelings about reproductions, if they're quality, and I buy both. I like to get originals and good reproduction. And the reproductions, you can get things that you can't get, of course, in the originals.
The reproductions include the Lionel Brass No. 7 with 18, 19, and 190 series passenger cars. The original engine was available from 1910 to 1923, and the cars, in this attractive light orange and cream color scheme, from 1916 to 1919. Lionel reissued the set in 1990. 2 classics from the Toy Train Hall of Fame, the Blue Comet and the State set. The 6-car Olympian set, headed by a Milwaukee Road bipolar, was made by Dick Meyer of the Rich Art Company. Another classic, the Rail Chief, headed by a Scale Hudson. Some of the accessories on the layout are also reproductions. They include the Hellgate Bridge, the freight platform, the rare double window station, and the roundhouse. Other trains from Foxy's mixed bag include a Scale GG1 by Weaver with K-Line heavyweight passenger cars, a Camelback steamer and passenger cars by Williams, an original maroon Lionel 380 with 200 series freight cars, a Bowser O-gauge trolley, and 2 Lionel pre-war O-gauge freight sets. Running side by side with the Olympian is a standard gauge Santa Fe streamlined passenger set that looks big enough to board. The 11-unit train is powered by 5 motors and was made by the DeHanes Company of Keesby, New Jersey. Harlan Creswell of Seattle, Washington made this standard gauge Hudson from scratch. Foxy bought it for $900 in 1970. Oscar thinks the competition brought on by all the new manufacturers is good for the hobby.
As long as they're quality, I think it's great and it's healthy for the industry. As I said earlier, it keeps people on their toes. They have to compete.
Oscar ought to explain that to Russ Larson of Classic Toy Trains. Foxy grew up in the late 20s and early 30s and vividly remembers his first train. Well, it wasn't exactly his first train.
Well, I have a soft spot in my heart for 42s. And so the 42, the 18, 19, and 190, I guess, would be my favorite train because that's the first train I knew, which was my brother's. And the 408E Apple Green is a must in my collection. I had one before and I've now replaced it. I had a 408E Apple Green locomotive when I was a kid, which was really something in the 30s to get that, but I never was able to get the cars. So I finally satisfied that yen. You relate to those. My original 259E with passenger cars, I have that over the doorway at the dining room, but it runs. And of course I have two 259Es running here, so it just proves that you go back to what you knew.
What happened to his brother's 42 set?
I saw an ad and sold it to a chap in New York, sent it to him, got the money, and it was enough to buy my city of Denver when I was a kid. And my brother's never forgiven me, even though I've replaced it, but not the same one.
Oscar Fox, 70, not only runs trains, he runs himself.
Well, I started competing in '79. Got in a race and enjoyed it and just went from there. Oh, I've run 28 marathons now. I guess my first marathon was the Marine Corps. I've run 12 I love the Marine Corps Marathon. I've run 12 of those. It's a regular sightseeing tour. It goes all through Georgetown and around the Pentagon, up Constitution Avenue, around the Capitol.
Foxy has even qualified for the most famous marathon of them all, the Boston Marathon.
Well, that's the only marathon you have to qualify for. You have to have a qualifying time, depending on your age. And I was fortunate enough to qualify in 82. For me at 70, it's 3 hours and 50 minutes. Well, I'm going to run it every 10 years when I'm 80, 90, 100, 110, 120.
Foxy looks great. Don't bet against him. Dave Petrowski got hooked on toy trains early.
Supposedly my father told me 20 days after I was born, that's when I got my first train set.
That was Christmas 1949. Dave was born on December 5th. That first train set was an American Flyer, but Dave soon switched to Lionel because Flyer trains were scarce.
Went on into the early 50s, mid-50s, Flyer pieces were very hard to get. Everybody in the family had Lionel. In 1955, to my surprise, I received a set of Lionels for Christmas in 1955. And that's how this all got started.
In those days, the stores reduced prices after the holidays, and Dave was not one to pass up a bargain.
The pieces here that we got, they were acquired probably when I was 13 years old, saving allowance money, saving money for shoveling snow and that, and run off to a train store right after Christmas, and most of the time they were closing the stuff out 50% off. So something was $6, you got it for $3, and it was affordable at that time.
Dave wanted to recreate for kids today the same fantasy world he remembered as a child. a Christmas tree, ornaments, a snow-covered carpet, tiny lights, and at the heart of the fantasy, toy trains.
It's like a wonderland to them, with the tree, the ornaments, all the animated ornaments. It's just everywhere they look, things are moving, and that's what gets kids interested in this. Every little man, every little car, every little light, anything that blinks, it gets their attention. I'm a policeman, and you see so many kids, so many problem kids, and you wonder if you gave them stuff that made them creative, like years ago, Lincoln Logs, American Bricks, Black City, Lionel trains, American Flyer trains, simple Plasticville. One of these $1 houses could keep a kid occupied for hours, taking it apart, putting it together, using their minds, rather than wasting their time on street corners and joining gangs and everything. You never hear of a Lionel gang, bunch of kids going to somebody's house and coming up with ideas of how they're going to set their trains up.
The layout measures 15 feet by 6.5 feet. There are 3 independent loops. The inner loop is a figure 8 and the outer loop has 054 curves. A ZW and LW transformers power the layout.
We put up the top layer a couple of years ago. I always liked that look in the Lionel catalog. Something up above like in a mountain, or a pass over a train going underneath another one, and a couple 1x6s and 2x4s cut down with this cotton batting on it, and it works out great.
About 200 feet of wires are under the 2-inch thick cotton batting, which is placed directly on top of the carpet. Plasticville buildings, die-cast figures and cars, a giant gateman, all contribute to that 50s type toy train layout look.
Your basic pieces of plastic, though, I don't think anything is rare, and all of them were probably dime store bought for $1 or under. In those days, nothing ran over $1. But they're Ertl cars, very reasonable. There's some Vesti in there, Solito. Toys, exactly. Bringing back those childhood days, 6, 7 years old, 4 years old, when you couldn't wait to get up and see what Santa Claus left you under the tree.
It's refreshing to see an old-fashioned toy train Christmas layout. No concern for realism here, just fun.
Memories of the old Lionel showroom layout in New York City, which opened in 1949, still fuel the enthusiasm of toy train buffs today. But that was then, this is now. This is the Lionel showroom layout for the 1990s. It's part of a new visitor center in the Lionel Administration Building located just off I-94 in Mount Clemens, Michigan. Tours of the new facility are open to the public by appointment. Stay tuned and Toy Train Review will give you a preview. The first stop on the tour is a fast-paced 10-minute video. It starts at the beginning when Joshua Lionel Cowan first opened shop in 1900 and moves quickly through some of the bad times and some of the boom times to the present, with Lionel firmly established as the largest toy train manufacturer in the United States. The video also gives you a peek inside the factory and shows how Lionel trains are made. The magic begins when you exit the theater and enter the 24 by 52-foot showroom. The layout is a 14 by 40-foot rectangle. You enter facing north about halfway down the 40-foot side of the display. The Lionel history wall is in front of you, the control panel to your right, along with a 4-foot-high mountain. 7 trains operate simultaneously on various levels throughout. 2 trains, a Lionel large-scale Northern Jeep and the standard gauge Blue Comet, travel along a plexiglass shelf just below the ceiling. There is even a train running on a small circle of track beneath, appropriately, a Christmas tree. The first part of the layout you see is the yard area. There is a turntable and 3-bay roundhouse, one of 3 scenes which evoke memories of the 1949 layout. The 3 main lines feature a GG1-led Amtrak passenger train, a freight headed by a New York Central Mohawk, and the irrepressible Santa Fe F3. They leave the yard together, heading east towards the entrance to the tunnel, which runs through the mountain. Exiting the mountain, they sweep north, past the new Lionel lift bridge, then west down the long stretch in front of the Wall of History. Here the tracks turn in towards the center of the layout. This allows unobstructed views of the various accessories and cars parked on sidings closer to the edge. About 1/3 of the way down, the Amtrak descends to the lower level, or as the Lionel people refer to it, the subway. The Santa Fe and Mohawk continue west, then turn south towards the Lionel City Station. The Amtrak, now in the subway line, reaches the area first. This vignette is similar to the famous tri-level scene which greeted visitors who entered the New York showroom. The Mohawk continues south, then turns east for the stretch run back to the yard, where it is joined by the GG1 as it emerges from the subway. The Mohawk rumbles through the yard, continuing east towards the mountain and another trip around the layout. The 4th train on the main level is powered by a red and white Frisco GP7. It also heads east and disappears into the mountain under a Lionel girder bridge. The Frisco emerges on the other side and travels a route west, below the plateau which runs the entire length of the layout. At the north end, it enters another tunnel and emerges on the other side in the yard area. "10 inches above the main level, a Chessie SD40 freight exits the yard heading west towards a small urban area. Past crossing gates, it makes a U-turn around the far end of the layout above the Lionel City Station. Then back east towards the Lionel Mountain. Into a tunnel, and out the other side, over the Lionel girder bridge, and onto a rocky ledge above the yard. The third area, reminiscent of the old Lionel showroom layout, is the top level. On the old layout, the electronic set used to travel along a track pattern which was shaped like a dog bone. Layout builders call this type of track pattern, not surprisingly, a dog bone. In the new layout, an American Flyer Missouri Pacific PA Alco pulling 4 streamlined passenger cars travels a similar path. The smaller S-gauge train, speeding along past trees and rock formations, 18 inches above the rest of the layout, gives the impression it's farther away than it really is. Using smaller trains on the upper levels to create the illusion of greater distance is called forced perspective. The new Lionel layout effectively uses this technique. Notice how the larger O-gauge trains appear to be closer. In addition to the Amtrak train, 2 Lackawanna MU cars operate in the subway. They are visible only at the cutout area and through a plexiglass window located just below the south end of the yard. The gateman and strobe light add a nice touch. Josh Cowan once said, "Children want movement and action. They just don't want to watch a train go round and round. A few minutes of that and the little nippers will wander off and squeeze out some toothpaste or set fire to the curtains." The new Lionel layout offers plenty of action and audience participation too. Over 50 buttons, which activate accessories, are placed at various points around the layout. Each button is labeled to indicate the accessory it operates. The 52-foot-long, 8-foot-high north wall is filled with trains, ads, photographs, catalogs, and other memorabilia depicting 90 years of Lionel history. The story begins with a blow-up of Joshua Cowan looking the way he must have looked in 1900 when he opened shop with the idea of making electrical novelties. They call this the Wall of Lionel History. We think it's more like a wall of Lionel memories. When you look at this room, the layout, all the lights, Lionel trains running from the floor to the ceiling amidst the sounds of steam whistles and diesel horns, you can't help but wonder what Joshua Lionel Cowan might have thought. We think he would have been happy and proud.
New from TM, Lionel Nation 6. We open with Lionel's classic steam switchers, from the scale and semi-scale switchers of the pre-war era to the high-tech switchers of the modern era. See Steve and Ricky Strauss's Lionel post-war layout, built from beginning to end, right before your eyes. We check out Lionel's irresistible operating and action cars, Lionel's iconic F3 in different color combinations, including the black and red version that was pictured in the 1948 catalog but never made. See both Lionel post-war and pre-war trains on Wayne Coble's two-level 9x14 foot layout, plus his extensive collection, beautifully displayed on custom-built oak shelving. The latest Lionel Vision and Classics line locomotives in action, plus operating tips and more. Another jam-packed issue filled with the exciting wall-to-wall train action you've come to expect from TM's Lionel Nation series. 65 minutes, only $19.99.
Welcome to Lionel Nation number 7. We have another great show for you. The Lionel Visitor Center layout has a new home. It has been moved to the Railroad Museum in Riverhead, New York. We take you there for an exclusive first look. Jim Suling and Doug Spittler both have modern-era model railroads. They demonstrate different approaches to building layouts. One is aimed at functionality and fun, and the other at realism and prototypical operation. We take a look at the earliest days of steam. We check out Lionel's Alaska NW2 switchers, both the catalog sets and the set created by collectors, part 2 of Lionel's action and animated cars, and tips on improving performance on MPC locomotives using post-war parts. 60 plus minutes of Lionel action and adventure. Don't miss it.
It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation.
Welcome to Lionel Nation Part 5. The spectacular North Park Center layout in Dallas will take your breath away. Craig Chedester operates post-war Lionel and collects as many variations as he can find. You'll be dazzled by George Wordrich's command control layout, where both post-war and new Lionel vie for your attention. See the latest Vision locomotives in action and a custom model of the Ferdinand Magellan, the observation car used in presidential campaigns. We visit the New York Central's museum and compare their real trains with Lionel's models of the same trains. We take you to lunch at the Choo Choo Diner in Des Plaines, Illinois, where your cheeseburger and fries are delivered on a Lionel train. Shot in widescreen and high definition. Plus a 40-minute bonus feature, original 16mm color film shot in the 50s and 60s of the layouts of charter TCA members. That's almost 2 hours of great Lionel action. Lionel Nation Part 5.
New from TM, Lionel Nation 6. We open with Lionel's classic steam switchers, from the scale and semi-scale switchers of the pre-war era to the high-tech switchers of the modern era. See Steve and Ricky Strauss's Lionel post-war layout, built from beginning to end, right before your eyes. We check out Lionel's irresistible operating and action cars, Lionel's iconic F3 in different color combinations, including the black and red version that was pictured in the 1948 catalog but never made. See both Lionel post-war and pre-war trains on Wayne Coble's two-level 9x14 foot layout, plus his extensive collection, beautifully displayed on custom-built oak shelving. The latest Lionel Vision and Classics line locomotives in action, plus operating tips and more. Another jam-packed issue filled with the exciting wall-to-wall train action you've come to expect from TM's Lionel Nation series. 65 minutes, only $19.99.
Welcome to Lionel Nation number 7. We have another great show for you. The Lionel Visitors Center layout has a new home. It has been moved to the Railroad Museum in Riverhead, New York. We take you there for an exclusive first look. Jim Suling and Doug Spittler both have modern-era model railroads. They demonstrate different approaches to building layouts. One is aimed at functionality and fun, and the other at realism and prototypical operation. We take a look at the earliest days of steam. We check out Lionel's Alaska NW2 switchers, both the catalog sets and the set created by collectors. Part 2 of Lionel's action and animated cars, and tips on improving performance on MPC locomotives using post-war parts. 60+ minutes of Lionel action and adventure. Don't miss it.
It's clear to me, oh can't you see, it's a Lionel Nation.
Remember when you wanted a Lionel train for Christmas more than anything? The wait was agonizing. Finally it came, Christmas morning. You ran to the living room, heart pounding. There was the Christmas tree, covered with sparkling lights and shimmering tinsel. And under the tree, gliding around an oval of 3-rail track, was a Lionel train, puffing smoke. Oh, the excitement. Memories like that are what this video is about. A Lionel Christmas is a poignant mix of heartwarming stories, great toy train action, and beautiful Christmas music that will make your heart soar, train buff or not. A 65-minute tribute to toy trains and Christmas that is guaranteed to bring back fond memories.
Under my Christmas tree.
From the creators of the classic Lionel Christmas Part 1 comes Lionel Christmas Part 2. See the incredible Christmas displays at the Gaylord Hotel in Dallas, the Woody Hickman home where trains and decorations fill every room, and the multi-level layout where Rich DiMondo combines Department 56 Snow Village buildings with Lionel trains. We take you on a behind-the-scenes look at Lionel on NBC's Today Show. We show you the tree in Rockefeller Center and the first ever Lionel retail store just across the street from Radio City Music Hall. We'll talk to hobby store owners who remember when hobby stores featuring Lionel trains were a must-stop at Christmas time for just about every family in the neighborhood. All shot in high definition and widescreen. Plus a bonus feature from the Lionel Nation series, Christmas in New York. We visit the Christmas train displays at Macy's, Grand Central Terminal, and FAO Schwartz. Lionel Christmas Part 2. Don't miss it.
Lionel Christmas.
New from TM, World-Class High Rail Layouts Part 2. Scale-detailed trains and layouts are the current rage in 21st century model railroading. In Part 2, we feature 4 unique displays from around the country. Bob Ermshire used his background in landscaping to create a magnificent multi-level layout that uses real rocks. Ron Zweig's impressive layout includes a scratch-built catenary system, subway, exquisite scenery, and prototypical train operation. Dennis Peffer uses MTH's DCS system to run lashed-up motive power
for longer prototypical freight and passenger trains. Carl Tuveson's layout boasts the most realistic looking track you'll ever see on a high rail layout. There's no third rail. 60 minutes of colorful scale trains running through accurately detailed towns, yards, mountains, and countrysides. World-class high rail layouts Part 2. Prepare to be amazed. TM presents World-Class High Rail Layouts Part 1. The New Jersey High Railers of Paterson, New Jersey have constructed the largest high rail layout in the world. It measures 185 feet long by 45 feet wide. That's 7,400 square feet of suburban life, industry, city high-rises, a 5-foot high helix, mountains, and a model of the New York City transit system. The train masters of Babylon have captured life in mid-century America with 700-foot main lines, subways, sidings, mountains, and a spectacular, custom-built, 10-foot-long trestle bridge. The Nassau Lionel Operating Engineers layout features 28 scale miles of track, tunnels, bridges, mountains, freight yards, engine houses, wide radius curves, and operating accessories. 60 minutes of world-class high rail layouts, all with scale buildings, detailed scenery, incredible vistas, and an irresistible mix of diesel and steam locomotive action. Prepare to be amazed. From the creators of A Lionel Christmas and other great Christmas videos, an all-new Christmas train spectacular. Christmas and toy trains just seem to go together, and no one captures that spirit better than TM Books and Video. Tom Gurman always wanted a Christmas layout that he could keep up all year round. It took him 50 years and an addition to his house, but he finally has his year-round layout. Steve Klein built a winter layout featuring a starry night sky over a sparkling village at Christmas time nestled near the Rocky Mountains. Gordon Huff sets the bar high, both for enthusiasm and for multi-level Christmas layouts. It took years, but Bob Wilkie finally has his dream layout. And John Smith commissioned TW Design to create a museum-quality layout that features both realism and fantasy. Marvelous stories that will tug at your heart, train buff or not. Plus the Christmas train exhibits at the Hancock Building and NBC Tower in Chicago. All shot in high definition and widescreen. We call this new DVD Christmas Train Spectacular. Why? Because the toy train Christmas displays are spectacular. Prepare to be amazed, and Merry Christmas.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Snyder and welcome to the Lionel Train's 100th anniversary. Let's go back to the beginning, to a loft at 24 Murray Street.
The growth of the company, the great job that Joshua Lionel Cowan did starting in 1900, the development of the Lionel trains, the hobby, the marketing, the promotion of it. He was a master at all of that. He was a great innovator. I think Lionel has always been an innovator down through the years. They've done some great stuff.
It's still such a mystery how that old Lionel brings out the kid in me. My Lionel train, my Lionel train. My Lionel train, my Lionel train. One day, many years ago, I remember my first toy train. I opened up the box so carefully, and I knew Lionel was staring up at me. My Lionel train, my Lionel train. My Lionel train, my Lionel train.
Visit our I Love Toy Trains outlet store. we have a fine selection of Lionel trains and accessories, both new Lionel and refurbished Lionel from the 50s. A nice selection of Lionel starter sets, including the Polar Express, one of the largest selections of the Thomas Wooden Railroad in Southwest Michigan, plus die-cast cars, quality toys you won't find in the big stores, and a fine assortment of DVDs, both for kids and grown-ups. Be dazzled by our 3-level operating O-gauge layout with 4-train action, even toys hanging and trains running on the ceiling. Our store is located in the charming resort town of New Buffalo, Michigan, just across the lake from Chicago. Stop by, you'll enjoy the visit. From Memorial Day to Labor Day and during the Christmas season, we're open 7 days a week, 11 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. Other times, Thursday through Sunday, 11 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. Our store number is 269-469-6811. If we're not open, call 1-800-892-8888